The Pirate King, the hero of the Marines, the world's strongest man, the world's strongest creature, the world's most powerful hag, and the man who stands above all of them, Rox Diesebek, have teamed up for a once-in-a-millennia attack, and despite being potentially the most powerful attack we have ever seen in all of the One Piece, it ended up doing absolutely nothing. The start of this chapter is rather bleak, to say the least, as is the end, but we'll get there. As Imu controlling the spider tentacles, I guess they are now, of Saturn spawns right in front of the Marines, and from the get-go, you just know that, mate, these guys, they are doomed. It gives me the same sort of demonic dread that Saturn first appearing on Eckerd Island did, with the island-wide warning for Marines ranked Commodore and below to not look at Saturn. And when that one lower-ranking Marine does look at him, he gets his head blown off, or at least that's how it appeared in the manga. In the anime, this scene is specifically shown from the side to make it clear that the Marine's head is still in fact intact. But what happens to the Marines on God Valley is a bit less ambiguous. They all get impaled by Saturn Mu's spider limbs. And I don't care if this is One Piece, these guys, they're all dead. As is everyone else who sees Imu, because this information cannot be allowed to spread. From the moment that Imu appeared, it was a declaration of extermination. And whether you are a pirate, a Marine, a civilian, or whatever, it does not matter, because you are just an eyesore that needs to be erased. But something rather concerning is that Imu's not just wiping out fodder characters here, because at least 2 of the Roger pirates also get skewered by Imu. Here on the floor we have Rowing the Scholar and Mugren, who doesn't have a specified crew role yet, but perhaps he could be the ship Kebab after this. Now, unlike the fodder Marines, I don't fear for the safety of either of them, as we have seen them sail with Roger all the way to Laugh Tale, so we know that they're not dying here. But Rowing said something that I think we really need the official translation to clear up, but the fan translation at the moment has Rowing saying that the pain is oddly compelling. And this sends a pretty sinister shiver down my man spine, because it makes me think of one of the dark continent calamities from Hunter x Hunter named Pap, which essentially turns humans into its pets by injecting them with sheer pleasure and slowly draining them of their life force as victims enjoy every last second of it. So something weird could also be happening here with Imu as well, and it might even have to do with the venom of Saturn. But again, I need to see what the official says, because it could just be a weird choice of words. And speaking of weird choice of words, in this chapter we also have Rox doing a chit chat with Imu, where Imu, for reasons, calls Rox Davy Jones, in the same sort of way that I recall Emmett referring to Luffy as Joy Boy, which Zunesho also did. Now, Emmett did, at the end of Egghead Island, admit that he had mistaken Luffy for Joy Boy, so I don't think that Rox is Davy Jones or a reincarnation of Davy Jones. Probably, but he clearly has the inherited will of Davy Jones to such a degree that Imu recognizes Rox more as Davy Jones than he does as Rox Diesebek. But the most interesting part of this encounter to me is when Rox states that promises are meant to be kept, because in regards to the ancient histories of the One Piece world, the word promise is very important. Joy Boy rather famously dedicated an entire poneglyph to an apology for failing to keep his promise to Fishman Island, a promise which involved the Noah, and likely a promise that we will see fulfilled by Luffy in the future. But it adds another point of evidence to the idea of Davy Jones and Joy Boy maybe being the same person, and that what Rox is referring to here is part of that same promise. Or alternatively, they could be 2 different people with 2 different promises, both they failed to fulfill. That is also possible. Particularly since you would think that what we have here are 2 strains of inherited will, as Goldie Roger is assumed to be the carrier of the will of Joy Boy in this era. But then again, we don't really know anywhere near enough to diagnose ancient willpower to the degree that beings like Imu, Emmett, and Zunesha can. And one of the most amazing things about this chapter is something that I've only just realized, which is that with all of the phenomenal things happening here, I completely forgot that the Holy Knights even existed. Particularly Garling, who I would have thought would be such a key player in a clash like this, and he still does have some time to re-gooden himself, but mate Imu is putting all of them to shame. The Holy Knights in One Piece certainly have left us disappointed and very much in need of some knightly redemption, which thankfully can be found in Raid Shadow Legends with the return of Ultimate Death Knight, a certified tanksome menace who heals himself whenever the enemies heal, a true MVP of the Raid roster, and a free legendary that you can get with the promo code UDKing if you're a new player. You do not want to miss out on this bad boy, so you can download Raid through my link or the QR code and use promo code UDKing and claim Ultimate Death Knight before he disappears again. However, in other exciting news, Raid has also partnered with Paramount to bring the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles into the game as legendary champions. So this is the promo video I'm watching now, and it is insane just how well the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fit into the Raid universe. Looks like Michelangelo is clearly our star here. It's interesting. I feel like it's usually either Leonardo or Raphael, but mate, Shredder, he looks phenomenal. And you can get your hands on all of them, starting with Michelangelo by logging in for 7 days. You can also fuse yourself a Donatello, and Leonardo, Raphael, April, and Shredder are all available through limited time events, which ends on November 13th, but you must start by October 30th to collect them, which you can and should do right now by clicking my link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen, which will instantly unlock a huge starter pack with Epic Champion Chonoru, and once you reach level 15, you'll get another amazing Epic Champion Uugo. Plus, new players can pick one of 6 promo codes for a legendary champion of their choice, including Green Warden, Ruraktu Hanurak, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, Tholan Foulbeard, the Ultimate Death Knight in question, and the one that I would personally most recommend, Alice the Wanderer. Plus, you can also come and find me under the name Groundline Guy and join my clan. So definitely check Raid out, but for now it's back to you. Me. Thanks, me. This chapter is quite tragic in many ways though. One of which is that the Rocks pirates have started to rapidly crumble, and it's not even because of Domi Reversi being used on Rocks himself. This has been happening for a long time, but now it is in full force. It started with the betrayal of Ochoku, and it's continued with Kaido smacking the Big Mum. Although I think that last one has mostly been taken in good sibling-esque humor, but what happened in this chapter with Captain John is on a whole different level. And I suppose that this was always going to happen when you gather a group of people not so much on the basis of following the dreams and ideals of a captain, but with the promise of their own individual gain. As John decided that this was the perfect opportunity to use his Eustace Kiddian devil fruit abilities to attempt to steal all of the treasure and go off on his own. John even has this very admittedly cool moment of standing there on his own and saying goodbye, Rocks pirates. And look, John might take some heat in the fan base here for being a bit of a prick, but just because John was the first one to do it doesn't mean that he was the only one thinking about it. He definitely was not. As it appears that all of the Rocks pirates, minus Shiki and the main band fighting Emu, have begun their version of the sequence that opens the Dark Knight, where all of the enclowned robbers are betraying each other one by one in order to get a bigger slice of the heist. And I love it because sure, it is a bit sad, because who knows how God Valley could have turned out if this crew, the most powerful in One Piece history, could have just had that little bit more cohesion. But also, I have to admit that this is the most pirate possible thing to do, this beautiful cascade of betrayal. And I've brought this up a lot lately because it's an event that I've been keenly anticipating, but this is almost certainly what Kaido was referring to with his personal betrayal complex, because while the heavy hitters are off supporting the captain, the other Rocks pirates are destroying their own crew well before the destruction of the captain. And something that I really want to nail in is mentioned by Ganzui, and that's that each of these treasure chests are worth approximately 1 billion berries, which is such an insane amount of cash monies. Each one of these chests are the value that the world government have placed on a Jack the Drought or a Charlotte Katakuri. Katakuri is a better example. And in One Piece, we even have a rough value for buying entire kingdoms, which is something that has been done on at least one occasion by Walpole. After accidentally starting a scientific revolution, Walpole made enough money to buy his own kingdom, which he names the Evil Black Drum Kingdom. And then we also have the price that Doflamingo put on the Kingdom of Dressrosa, which was 10 billion berries. So in that one panel of Captain John surrounded by all of the chests, there is enough value there to buy at least 2.5 Dressrosas. And I really want that to land with anyone watching this video, because it's not just pirates betraying each other for like a modest collection of treasure. If you are the person to successfully get away with all of this, then you would probably become the richest man in the world who is not a world noble. That is the kind of value that it took to crumble the Rocks pirates. And also it's the kind of value that the Roger pirates end up with on their ship, which probably contributes to 1/3 of the iconic opening line of One Piece: wealth, fame, and power. We know that God Valley was shockingly successful for the wealth of the Roger Pirates with all of the chests that they nabbed, including one with Shanks. But I also feel like Golden Lion Shiki may end up with a fair few chests as well, maybe even quite a few, and that may be how he went on to fund his future pirate fleet. Remembering that at one point Shiki had a fleet about 5 times the size of Whitebeard before it was mostly all swallowed by a storm during the Battle of Ed War. So that's where I think we're going here, because this section ends with Ganzui attempting to take out Shiki from behind with a rather unexpected devil fruit ability. And mate, this fruit, it is giving me flashbacks within a flashback, as Ganzui was apparently the previous user of the Bomu Bomunumi, which was only like the 5th or 6th devil fruit that we had ever seen used in One Piece by Gem, also known as Mr. 5 on Whiskey Peak. And the truly trippy thing is that Ganzui is using the fruit in the exact same way that Gem did, by picking his nose and flicking the explosive snot at his enemies. And this is one of those devil fruits that would be wildly overpowered if it was used in any way other than how we've seen it used, which is a fun gag by Oda, because it's not just bodily secretions that can explode, it is just the body in general. You can punch someone and that punch explodes them. It is such a good hand-to-hand fighter fruit. Although to be fair, Ganzui, even using the snot approach, does seem to have used it to one-shot Captain John, so that he's really living up to the user of Eustace Kid's devil fruit, as whoever seems to inherit it becomes the newfound king of being one-shotted. But it's this behavior that gets to me though. What are the odds of two completely unrelated people consuming this fruit and speccing their build around the exact same niche application? And so it forces me to ask yet again the question of, are these two related in some way, Ganzui and Gem? And if so, this would now be a 4th Rocks Pirates member suspected to be related to a previous character, with the aforementioned Captain John and Eustace Kid, but there was also the speculation of Don Marlin being related to Capone Gang Beige, and of course Ochoku being a potential father of Caribou. Now we have Ganzui and Mr. 5. But look, all of that aside, I can't see Shiki losing to Ganzui, not the same way that Captain John did, or at all, because we know the future of both of these characters, sort of. We know that Ganzui ends up as a dead corpse on Moria's Thriller Bark. Meanwhile, we don't actually know canonically what happened to Shiki. We don't know where he is today. He could still be alive out there somewhere. So I think that Shiki's gonna take out Ganzui and potentially even Silver Axe to wrap up that rivalry, and he may emerge the winner of the Rocks Pirates Surprise Battle Royale. To get back to John for a bit though, in addition to commencing the breakdown of the Rocks Pirates, John using his powers here may be one of the most impactful acts of the entire God Valley incident, because John's sheer magnetism leads to Dragon being knocked out and Baby Shanks crawling into the treasure chest that will eventually end up in possession of the Roger Pirates. And it all happens right at the last second as well. Dragon, he spies a marine ship and he's planning on handing Shanks over to them, but then Captain John went and changed the future through sheer dickery, and it's probably for the best that Shanks did not get handed over to the Marines, because I imagine that they would have been pressured to return Shanks to Garling in the Holy Land, and instead of the Emperor Sea we have today, we would have 2 Shamrocks and probably no Luffys, because there was no mentor to inspire him. And that sort of thing is what I love so much about this stage of the God Valley incident. Every action taken, no matter how small, has radically shaped the modern day that our characters currently live in. And all it takes is a couple, maybe even just one, very small thing to not happen at the right time, and this entire planet would be doomed. I do feel pretty bad for Dragon though. He ends his involvement in this chapter on the floor cuddling an emotional support log, almost as if Baby Shanks used a substitution jutsu. Very talented baby. But this is going to be Dragon's darkest day. At the end of this, he'll probably be feeling a lot like Luffy did after the death of Ace, because Dragon did everything he could with the power level of a fodder marine, and he fought valiantly. But going away from this incident at first, it's gonna feel like he completely failed. He's gonna wake up, Baby Shanks will be gone, God Valley itself might even be gone, and he will feel like he is so powerless that he couldn't even save a single baby. We, as readers, know what happened with Shanks is for the best, but that's not necessarily how it's going to look to Dragon. And it makes me want to see a scene in the future where Dragon realizes that Shanks did indeed survive that day. Perhaps Dragon sees Shanks' first rookie bounty after Roger's execution, and he gives himself a little moment of joy, knowing that everything he did was not and is not currently in vain. That's only one half of our baby stories told though, as we also have Eris fleeing with Baby Teach, which isn't going to end particularly well either. In fact, it's going to end a lot worse. Not for lack of effort though, as in this chapter, this is so cool, as we see 6 legends going all out against Emu. And the 2-page spread of these 6 beasts of the world all attacking Emu at once actually took me a really long time to process, just because of how surreal it is. Looking at this panel almost feels like fan fiction, seeing all of them team up. The future pirate king, the world's strongest man, the strongest creature, the strongest hag, the hero of the Marines and Rocks, who unfortunately technically doesn't have one of those titles, but I still somehow feel like he surpasses all of them. And also Zeus is there, which is wild because he's currently with us. Zeus is practically a Straw Hat, and yet here he was during this legendary clash. But among all of this, my favorite attack is easily Kaido's. So what he's doing, right, he's obviously using a Borrow Breath, but he hasn't had the time with his Devil Fruit to properly name his attacks yet. So instead, he improvises, and he just yells out, Dragon! And it takes me back to one of my favorite gags of any Sobby, where Kaku has to improvise names for all of his new fruit abilities, and one of the ones that he settles on is Pasta Machine, which annoys Zoro. And guys, I swear I am enjoying Kaido so much more in this flashback than I did probably all throughout Wano. I love that Oda now has the license to be a bit more wacky with Kaido, because we don't need to view him as a primary antagonist anymore. But these 2 pages is so full of stuff. There's a lot of trademark attacks happening here. With Roger, we get to see our 3rd divine departure of the series, always a pleasure. And Big Mom is doing the Elbaf-inspired Ikoku Sovereignty. Garp, among all of this, is doing his Galaxy Impact. But the one we really need to highlight most is, of course, Rox, as Rox uses an attack named Pandemonium of the Abyss, with the kanji literally reading as Curse of the Abyss, which definitely feels very Davy Jones inspired, as Davy Jones is a mythical being who lives in a deep area of the ocean known as an abyss. But also, the abyss now has a tangible meaning in the One Piece world, so this goes well beyond mythology, as the Holy Knights, the Elder Stars, and I guess Imu can all use the abyss to travel. And it makes me wonder if we'll ever see an arc in the abyss. Oh, probably not an arc, but using the abyss as an arena for a fight, like Luffy versus Katakuri in the Mirror World, but instead Luffy versus whoever in the abyss. But even with all of this, Imu seems to take no damage, which is rather horrifying in its own right, but nowhere near as horrifying as what comes next. As we've been predicting that God Valley was going to end with Rox being Domi reversied pretty much ever since he made his full appearance in this flashback, and now at the end of this chapter, it has actually happened. But even though we could sort of see where this was going, it is still quite shocking and jarring, because if a man like Rox Dizabek can be affected by this ability, then what is stopping Imu doing this to anyone at any time in any part of the world? Well, there may be a couple of things. The first is that I've seen it suggested that Domi Reversi works similar to Big Mom's Devil Fruit ability, as Charlotte Linlin only has domain over your soul if you are afraid of her at the time, or like Boa Hancock's fruit, which only takes effect if you're feeling, certain tingles between your legs when you're looking at her. And in Imu's case, that feeling, maybe it could be sheer anger or despair, like how Rox was caught in this chapter, because it was almost like Imu was baiting Rox into an emotional response by mentioning his family. And that could be how Luffy remains unaffected in the modern day once we do cut back to Elbaf, because in his Gear 5th form, Luffy's emotions are unbeatable. You're not going to be able to make the Sun God feel anything except for pure joy and elation, but that's very much a more vague explanation, and I do think there's a more interesting and also more consistent idea available. As when Domi Reversi was first unleashed, we discussed that in Latin, what it means is I returned home. And so the restriction of Domi Reversi could be that it only works on people who were born in the location that Domi Reversi is currently being used, which is why only Davy Clan members have been affected on God Valley, and only the Giants are currently being affected on Elbaf. Although one issue with that is that God Valley wasn't just the home of the Davy Clan. There were 100,000 other civilians that have not, to the best of our knowledge, been Domi Reversi'd yet. And we also don't know if it was Imu or Shamrock who converted the other members of the Davy Clan. But regardless, I do like this idea a lot better because it makes the name make sense, and it would mean that Imu can't just take command of anyone at any time. It needs to be in a certain place. And so Rox just got extremely screwed over by fate here, and the only way that this ability would work on Luffy is if Imu faced off against him on Dawn Island. And also, getting rid of God Valley would mean that Imu could never use this on Blackbeard, because Blackbeard now has no home to return to. And this also goes to support a long-standing theme of One Piece, with the famous words of the late King Cobra being, "A country is its people," which was such a wonderful, heartfelt line. It's why Vivi was so adamant about blowing up the Alabama Palace, because sure, it would destroy the building and some history, but it would save the people and therefore the country. But this line is a lot less wonderful when it gets flipped on you. If a country is its people, then all right. I guess Moo's just got to corrupt all the people and then, no more country. And the plan from here is predictably tragic because, of course, this is a flashback. It's got to be tragic. And so Imu is intending to have Rox kill his own family. And this is a big moment, because we're going to get to see if it is possible to resist the will of Domi Reversi from within. But also also, I've got a feeling that in the next chapter, we are going to see the end of the God Valley incident in chapter 1096 come to life. That chapter ended with a brief exchange between Rox and Roger, where Roger implores Rox to wait, and Rox snaps back at Roger to get out of his way. At the time, this seemed like classic rivalry lines, but now I'm thinking that the Rox speaking here was the Dommy reversied Rox on his way to kill Eris and Teach. So we will see, but you let me know what you thought of the chapter in the comments below.